Brian Griffin, the pretentious, self-proclaimed intellectual of Family Guy. But behind the liberal tweets and the glass of dry martini lies a trail of crimes, cons, and cringe that would make even Stewie raise an eyebrow. From emotional manipulation to full-on felonies, this dog's rap sheet is longer than Quagmire's list of exes. So today, we're breaking down every single time Brian Griffin absolutely deserved to go to jail. Buckle up. It's about to get criminal. We're starting off our list with Brian's least punishable crimes that might put him in jail if the victim insists on sending him to jail. The episode Brian the Closer starts with Peter discovering an old rope of Brian's that was casually sitting underneath the couch for years. Brian remembers how fond he was of the rope, so he is very happy to find it once again. Seeing the happiness on Brian's face as he plays with the rope makes Peter extremely jealous, so he plans to steal it from him. But no matter how much he tries, Brian never lets it go.
Come on, Brian, you better let go.
I told you this is mine. You're never gonna get it.
The smile that Brian has used to rizz up so many chicks becomes no more in just a matter of a few seconds.
Man, I'm real sorry about your mouth, Brian.
After losing his teeth, Brian starts to hate himself because of how he looks. Even his family starts to joke about his miserable looks. When he asks them if they can take him to a vet to get his teeth fixed, they tell him that money doesn't grow on trees. This whole experience makes Brian feel extremely depressed, so just like any other depressed guy out there, he heads to a bar and drowns himself in alcohol to ease his sorrows. There he ends up stumbling into Quagmire, who can't help but feel repulsed by his used condom-looking face. So to free the world from seeing such a hideous face daily, he hands Brian his dentist card and tells him that the tab is on him.
I won't forget this, Glenn Quagmire.
Don't ever say my name like that, okay?
Brian is extremely grateful to Quagmire for saving his smile and potentially his life, as who knows what he could have done if he had to live with such a ridiculous face for the rest of his life. And just like that, Brian gets a new smile. And his new smile is so big and wide that people start to mistake him for a real estate agent.
Bring on the rain, so stop your sighing. Be happy again. Keep on.
Seeing Brian so easily close a house deal with a couple, even though he's not a real salesman, the real agent can't help but recruit Brian for his company.
Look at that smile. You're a born salesman.
After joining the agency, Brian closes a lot of big deals, but he isn't satisfied with the money that he is earning, and that's where a cunning scheme comes to his mind. He scams Quagmire into buying a rundown condo by lying to him that the property he's signing for is a waterfront property that will appreciate in value after the deal is done. Quagmire is a bit suspicious at first, but after seeing his huge smile, he decides to trust Brian and signs the papers even before seeing the property in the first place. However, when Quagmire arrives at the property, he realizes that it's the most dog shit condo that he has seen in his life, not to mention that there is no waterfront that Brian mentioned. It's at this moment that Quagmire realizes that he has been scammed by the dog who owed him that very same big smile that he used to scam him.
Look, Mr. Griffin's not here, but if you leave your name, I'll let him know you stopped by. They're gone.
But by the time Quagmire learns the truth, Brian has already hidden himself, as the contract states that if the deal isn't reversed in 3 days, Quagmire won't be able to get a refund. However, no matter how far away Brian runs, he still gets caught by Quagmire, who grabs him by his collar and tells him how much of a scumbag he is.
You know, when you were poor, you were always a douche, but at least you came by it honestly. But now, screwing over the people who helped you? I don't know how you sleep at night.
After hearing the truth from Quagmire, Brian realizes that what he has been doing is indeed wrong. He apologizes to Quagmire and promises that he will fix his mistakes and repay the debt that he owes him. Quagmire finally realizes that no matter how much he tries, a dog's tail will never straighten. So he grabs the lamp nearby and strikes right at Brian's face, knocking out all his new teeth. Honestly, he kinda deserved it. Even the most scummiest of the scumbags at least knows how to repay their gratitude. Yet Brian is out here scamming people into buying fraud properties using underhanded means. Quagmire should have filed a case against him and let Brian taste the air of the prison. The episode Be Careful of What You Wish For starts with Brian heading to a daycare to pick up Stewie. There, he notices that Stewie is fully covered in paint, which makes him wonder if there was some sort of art activity going on at the daycare.
Jeez, you're a mess. What is that?
That was finger paint day.
Brian is a bit worried as Stewie continues to explain how terrible Miss Emily is and how she doesn't even care what the children are doing as long as they are not disturbing her.
You know, Stewie, maybe I should come by tomorrow and check things out. That teacher sounds really irresponsible.
And he does.
Oh my God!
After seeing this, Brian becomes extremely angry and heads out to confront this evil witch who is ruining so many young lives.
Excuse me, are you Miss Emily?
Yeah, hi.
Oh shit, here we go again. After seeing Miss Emily, Brian's anger vanishes like Kool-Aid at Walmart whenever there's a theft raid. Brian is absolutely smitten by this hot Miss Emily, so he keeps on visiting the daycare, not to check on Stewie, but to flirt with Emily whenever he gets the chance. One day he visits the daycare but doesn't find Emily there. Stewie tells him that she gave him the keys to open the daycare and left to go shopping. Stewie tries to hint to Brian how negligible this Miss Emily is, but Brian turns a blind eye to all of her red flags. Why? Because she is simply hot. Very hot.
She's doing her best, you know? She's got a lot on her plate. She's got school, she's got work.
This is her work.
Telling adults to do their job is like asking Mort Goldman to give you your pennies back. Even though it's your right, you end up sounding rude and anti-Semitic. Brian tries his best to make Stewie not give up on this daycare, as this will make him lose any chance that he has at begging Emily.
Oh, hi, Brian. I thought you had a busy day at your legal practice.
After hearing the word legal practice, Stewie finally realizes what's going on and can't help but stare at his scummy, horny dog friend whose brain is always full of nothing but lustful thoughts. Brian continues to ignore Stewie's plea for help as he doesn't want his situationship with Emily to die this early on. If you don't think Brian deserves to go to jail for this, then there might be something wrong with you. Just like what's wrong with Emily. The next day, Stewie comes home with a dislocated shoulder and tells Brian about what happened at the daycare.
I finally stood up for all of us and told Miss Emily we should be given a proper lunch.
And the result of standing up was getting his arm dislocated from his shoulder. At this point, Stewie already had enough of Miss Emily and Brian, who refused to do anything about her.
I'm gonna tell Mom.
Mom! You are not going anywhere.
Brian can't just let Stewie ruin all his plans with Emily, so he stops him and forcefully puts his arm back into his shoulder so that he wouldn't be able to complain about Emily.
I finally have a date with Miss Emily tomorrow, and I'm not gonna let you or anybody else get in my way until I have seen every inch of her naked.
Someone please call 911 on this horny dog before he ends up doing something much worse in the name of lust. Brian is extremely excited for his date with Miss Emily, but all of this excitement gets washed down when he learns that she already has a boyfriend and he's much bigger and hotter than him. This prompts Brian to do something that he should have done much earlier in this episode, and that's to call 911 and have Miss Emily thrown into prison.
What you did to these kids? There is a special place in hell for people like you.
I could say the same thing about you, Brian. Not all dogs go to heaven, especially those pit bulls named Muffin or Cookie Dough. Brian's horniness has led him to do unimaginable things, and sometimes he goes way too far. The episode Scammed Yankee starts with Brian complaining to Stewie about how annoying and gross Meg's friends are. While he is complaining, Meg enters the room and asks Brian if he can drive them to the school as they have a tennis practice match. Brian makes different excuses at first, but when Stewie tells him that it's a great way to make them leave early, he accepts Meg's request, only that they won't annoy him in the car. But girls are girls, and they still end up making his brain scramble from all the stupid talk. Due to their yapping, one of the girls ends up forgetting her bag in his car, so he has no choice but to walk into the school and deliver it to whoever the bag belonged to. While looking for Meg and her friends, he accidentally ends up walking into a locker room where he discovers the best secret of his life. The ugly-looking Patty actually has the body of a 10 out of 10 model. Brian is completely smitten by Patty's body, so much that he can't help but open up to Stewie about how hot she is.
Just a tiny waist, firm butt, great rack.
She's in high school.
I know, and she's in high school.
That's the problem, Brian. She's in high school. But Brian doesn't care as long as he gets to smash. So to achieve his goal, he starts to rizz up Patty by doing small actions such as buying her a plushie, taking her out to Panda Express for dinner, and listening to all her favorite artists, even though he hates modern music. All that just to bag a high school chick. How low can this dog fall? Meg notices that Brian is getting way too close to Patty, so she finally confronts him about it.
What the hell is going on? You're hitting on Patty and it's gross. She's 18.
At least she's 18, unlike some of the other partners whom Brian had with. Oof. Meg's word passes straight through Brian's brain as his neurons are too busy pumping blood to his wiener that got an erection just by talking to a high school chick in the middle of a mall. Talk about the worst place to have an erection. After trying his best for a few days, Brian finally gets a date with Patty. They head out to watch a movie, and afterwards, Brian takes her to see the stars at night, as what's the best place to do nightly activities if not under the very starry sky?
You're so deep.
I bet you're pretty deep, too.
Aww.
Come on, Brian, that's disgusting. Even though she's 18, she's still a high schooler and a friend of your best friend's daughter. The sense of morality doesn't apply to Brian, who immediately starts digging his way to see how deep Patty is. But fortunately, before he does anything, Meg arrives and stops him. The night ends with Brian with an $18 loss and an arrest warrant that he almost got if not for Meg stopping him from committing a felony. If Brian narrowly dodged the bullet the previous time, in this episode, he ends up acting on his urges, only to regret it later when he realizes what he has done. The episode Play It Again, Brian starts with Lois asking Peter to go attend a family dinner with her, but when it's time for them to go, Peter ditches her and heads with the boys to do some fishing. Lois is extremely upset, as this is not the first time he has done such a thing. But just like always, she forgets him and things move on. Or at least that's what she thought, but Peter keeps on ditching their plans and is never home to give her the time that she needs as his wife. This causes their already fragile relationship to become even more sensitive. While the couple is on the verge of breaking apart, Brian becomes the voice of reason and tells them that he has a suggestion.
All you two have done is argue about stuff for the past 2 weeks. It's my guess you could use a vacation.
Brian's wonderful suggestion gives Peter and Lois just the right opportunity to fix their relationship. Brian is also happy as he invites them to visit Martha's Vineyard to watch him receive his award. The couple agrees, but they have one last bit of problem. Since all three of them will be out on vacation, who would watch the kids? They try to ask their neighbors, but all of them are busy in one way or another.
Well, wait a minute. What about that nice old man who lives up the street?
Oh, yeah. Maybe Herbert can watch the kids. He seems like a responsible guy.
This might be the worst decision these two have ever made. Like, come on. They could have chosen anyone, but they chose whom? Herbert? To look out for their kids? It's like Justin's mother leaving him to spend 48 hours with Diddy or Drake's neighbor trusting him with their kids. Meanwhile, Herbert is singing his heart out of joy as he can't wait to diddle Chris and Stewie. Peter and Lois arrive at the resort in hopes that this will allow them to mend their broken relationship. At least that's what Lois believed. But Peter still remains unserious and keeps on becoming a headache for Lois. Whether it's role-playing as a shark, or acting like a drunkard dad trying to applaud his son who has finally achieved something big in his life.
You've been a good son, Brian, and I'm sorry you're so sick.
Everything that Peter does ends up making Lois even madder at him. If that wasn't enough, the romantic night that Lois had planned for them also becomes ruined because Peter was too drunk to do anything and only ended up farting all night because he ate too much meat.
Ah, that's so much better.
Peter's shenanigans and zero interest in mending their sexual life make Lois look for other alternatives, so she just decides to spend the rest of her vacation with Brian, who at least has the heart to treat her right. After a whole day of spending their day doing romantic activities, Brian starts to feel like he might really have a chance with Lois. So later at night, when they are having dinner together, Brian decides to come out openly with his honest feelings.
Well, you know, Lois, you mean a lot to me. When you drive away to go to the market, I just don't know what to do with myself.
Or at least he tries to, but realizing that he isn't really poetic when it comes to flirting with Lois, he stops and decides to choose the alternative route.
Oh my god, Brian, no! No, stop it!
So yeah, I am pretty sure this counts as an attempted rape. Lois seriously told Brian to get off multiple times, yet he still insisted. God, this horny dog really needs some time in prison. They should put him in a cell alongside Diddy, so that he can learn what true freakiness looks like. Lois doesn't know how to explain this to Peter, so the next time Peter brings up Brian in the conversation, Lois decides to open up and tell him what Brian did. Even though Peter is a chill guy, he is still a faithful and protective husband, so when someone tries to bang his wife, he isn't one to sit around and watch from the cuck chair.
Hey, Lois told me there was some funny business.
Yeah, what of it?
Well, it's just, I can't help but feel a little betrayed, Brian.
Peter tries to make Brian understand that what he did was extremely wrong, but Brian, he ends up trying to shit-talk Peter into believing that it's his fault that he ended up doing what he did to Lois.
Yeah, well, you don't deserve her, you know that? I mean, you've barely spent any time with her at all on this vacation.
You have a point, Brian, but that doesn't mean that you should force yourself on a man's wife, especially when that man's your best friend.
Well, who the hell are you to tell me how to run my marriage?
Things become heated, and they both end up beating each other to a pulp before finally reconciling and promising that they will fix their mistakes and be good to Lois. Although Lois and Peter might have forgiven Brian for what he did, that doesn't mean that he should be allowed to roam the streets freely, especially after what he had done to Lois. Brian's scummy attitude towards the women is not really a secret, but sometimes even he takes things too far, and this is exactly what he does in the episode Petty 4. The episode starts with Brian's landlord threatening to kick him out because his rent is due for 4 weeks. He tells Brian that if he doesn't pay up the rent soon, he will have no choice but to kick him out.
Okay, look, I'll get a job, okay? There's gotta be something I can do.
As long as it's not writing a new book, I'm pretty sure you can make your way around things.
Welcome aboard, Brian. This is your coworker, Martha.
And just like that, Brian forgets everything as he is too stunned by Martha's beauty. Martha explains to Brian about their job at the suicide hotline, but Brian is too engrossed in staring into her deep valleys. Martha pulls Brian out of his dreams and suggests to him that he take the first call, and then she will decide if he needs any advice from her or not.
Suicide hotline.
Hey, I'm a pathetic dog whose family kicked him out, and I want to kill myself.
Stewie?
Yeah, that pretty much sums up the whole experience of working at the suicide hotline. Also, Stewie needs to chill with his words, or Brian might really end up offing himself, although that would be better for society. Especially women. It hasn't even been a full week before Brian starts to openly flirt with Martha, as he even invites her over to his place for Netflix and grill. Martha doesn't like Brian's vibe, so she rejects his offer and leaves. But this isn't going to stop Brian. As soon as Martha leaves, Brian takes out his bottle of lotion and gets right to work off his excess energy. Brian thought that he was all alone, so he was jerking off his meat in silence when suddenly Martha, who feels bad that he rejected Brian, comes to invite him for drinks. And there, she ends up discovering the most horrifying thing that she has seen in her life. This is like the time when I was a teenager and thought that no one was home. The rest is history. Back to Brian. He is at risk of losing a job, which means that he won't be able to pay his rent, which is still due. Fortunately, his landlord has a suggestion for him, and Brian takes no shame in doing that as long as he can pay his rent.
Do what I do when people don't pay their rent. Plant drugs and call the cops.
The following day, Brian secretly puts cocaine under Martha's desk and calls the cop to bust her. Martha puts all the blame on Brian, but seeing that the cops don't care, she kicks Brian down the stairs, which breaks one of his legs. Deserved. If you feel bad for Martha for being deceived by this evil dog, then this upcoming episode might really end up ruining whatever likeness for Brian that's left in your heart. The episode Married with Cancer starts with Brian in a club where he meets this hot chick named Jess who seems to be a bit freaky, just the type that he likes.
I like you, Brian. You actually say what's on your mind.
Hey, life's too short, right?
Yeah, life is too short, especially when you have cancer. That's what Jess reveals to Brian as she tells him that she has cancer and will die soon. Brian isn't the one to miss a limited time pussy, so he ends up grabbing whatever he can, and they end up at Jess's place.
That was incredible.
After spending so much time with Jess, Brian gets attached to her, so he brings her to meet the Griffins. And let's just say things get pretty unsavory on the dinner table as just one cancer joke after another.
See? I told you. At least I don't have cancer like your girlfriend.
That's it. I'm getting you out of here.
Outside, Jess becomes dizzy after kissing Brian and falls unconscious. Brian takes her to the hospital, where the doctor tells her that her treatment didn't respond to her cancer, which means that she only has 2 weeks left to live. Jess tells Brian that she always wanted to get a nice job and then get married to have kids with the love of her life. Brian tells her that he can't do all these things, but at least he can do one of those, which is to make Jess his bride. Brian knows that Jess only has 2 weeks to live, so he wants to use this as an opportunity to gain sympathy from everyone around him and become famous. Even though Jess wants a simpler wedding, Brian throws her a big one, as he wants to show everyone how much he loves her.
I now pronounce y'all husband and wife. Kiss!
Just then, the doctor from earlier arrives and gives the couple the good news that Jess's treatment was successful and that she won't be dying anytime soon. Brian can't believe that the temporary marriage that he did for the sake of clout would end up turning into a rope around his neck. He tries to cope by reminding himself that at least Jess is hot and not bland like other girls. However, everything gets ruined when he learns Jess's true nature. Before cancer, Jess was a fat and ugly chick, not to mention that she's a cat lover, a species that Brian hates the most. Brian also learns that Jess used to wear a fake wig on her head, and in reality, she was bald due to undergoing chemotherapy. Brian is on the edge of his seat, but he can't really do anything. He is officially married to her, and divorce isn't an option as it would ruin all of his credibility and good reputation that he has built. As if this dog had any in the first place. One day, Brian and Jess are at a diner, where Jess, who has gotten fat from eating so much food, accidentally chokes herself on some nachos, which blocks her airways. She tries to shake Brian into helping her. Brian stands there, still, as he watches her die by choking on the same chips that got her so fat. It's only after Jess is dead that Brian finally calls 911 to ask for help. Later at Jess's funeral, Brian gives a fake speech about how much he loved her and how he wishes that she would come back alive and meet him one last time. His wish comes true as just as he says this, Jess's coffin opens up as she informs everyone that she's okay. By now, Brian has only committed small crimes and nothing that seriously warrants him going to jail. But this next crime on the list will definitely put him in jail if he ever gets caught. The episode to the North Pole starts with Brian taking Stewie to meet Santa at the mall. After waiting in an extremely long line, their number finally comes up as Stewie tries to strike the deal of the century with Santa. Stewie thought that his $1 bill would be enough to bribe Santa, but unfortunately Santa is too busy, and since his shift comes to a close, he leaves without entertaining his ideas.
Wait, what are you doing? Santa? You can't leave now!
Stewie makes this a personal vendetta as he promises to go to the North Pole and kill Santa Claus with his own 2 hands. He forces Brian to drive him to the North Pole, but Brian stops him and tells him the truth that no kid should ever hear. Brian realizes that there is no point in debating with Stewie, so he agrees to take him to the North Pole so that he can personally witness this overconfident baby's reality crumble into dust. However, when they finally arrive at the North Pole, Brian is shocked to learn that Santa Claus really exists.
Oh my God! You're Santa Claus!
Santa is also shocked to see a random dog and a baby appear out of nowhere to visit his humble abode. He asks them who they are and why they're here.
I'm Stewie Griffin, and I'm going to kill you.
Oh, thank God.
That's how your average 9-to-5 wage slave feels on the evening of Sunday when he realizes that tomorrow is Monday. Stewie and Brian learn the horrors behind the jolly and happy Santa and how the increasing demands of toys have made Santa and his little helpers' lives miserable and hellish. The elves, who used to be a noble race and took pride in their work, are now reduced to mere inbreds. With increasing demand for toys, Santa needed more and more workers, which led to a generation of inbreeding among elves. After showing Stewie and Brian the horrors of the Christmas factory, Santa collapses as he doesn't have it in him anymore to do any more of this present bullshit.
Who's gonna deliver all the presents?
We will.
What?
Don't worry, Santa. We'll make sure there's a Christmas this year.
Thank you, Brian.
With Brian and Stewie taking up the mantle of delivering gifts all around the world, they soon arrive at their first location. With no way to get inside the house besides breaking in through the window, Stewie and Brian end up alerting the family, who threaten to call the police on them.
You're Santa Claus. That's why you broke in through the window. I'm calling the cops.
No, I can explain.
Stewie is worried that the cops might end up delaying their plans for Christmas, so he takes the decisive step and unalives the man by hitting him in the head. To hide the evidence, they hide his body in a closet, but the commotion is too which causes the rest of the family to wake up. Afraid that they might end up being charged with murder, Brian helps Stewie in unaliving the wife as well, and also taping the mouth of the young girl so that she doesn't scream.
All right, let's get this place cleaned up.
Now look, Brian wasn't the one who killed the parents of the little girl, but he did help Stewie in the crime and even cleaned up the evidence for him. So he is as much involved in the crime as Stewie is. This next entry on this list is by far my most hated moment of Brian, and one that I'll never forgive him for. The episode Herpes the Love Sore starts with Brian and Stewie watching old movies on TV, where the two main characters become blood brothers after using the ancient ritual of exchanging blood. Stewie is fascinated by this ritual, so he urges Brian to do the same to him.
I think we should hold hands more often.
There you go. We're blood brothers now. You happy?
Actually, yes.
Brian and Stewie perform the ritual by cutting off the palms of their hands and then shaking hands to mix each other's blood in their veins. Stewie is very happy after forming the blood bond, but all of that happiness vanishes after he wakes up the next morning and realizes that he has gotten herpes.
You son of a... You gave me herpes!
What? What are you talking about?
When we swapped blood! Look at my lip!
No matter how many times I look at this, I always feel the creeps. Ugh. My skin tingles. Stewie is extremely angry at Brian for giving him the cringiest disease in the world, but Brian denies any involvement and even calls Stewie a slut. Stewie doesn't trust him, so he gets right under his fur, and what he discovers leaves him shocked. What angers me the most is that Brian not only gave Stewie the herpes, but he also gave it to Brian, who also formed a blood bond with him long ago. When Stewie learns about it, he decides to take revenge on Brian and make him feel sorry for what he did. So from that day on, Stewie and Brian continue to inform everyone that Brian has herpes. They even change his Facebook profile to herpes, which finally makes Brian admit that he feels ashamed of what he did and tells both Brian and Stewie that he will do whatever they want him to do to make up for what he did. Chris is happy to take his car for a drive, but Stewie doesn't want to let him go this easily, so he keeps asking him for things that are impossible to do. I can totally understand Stewie here. Imagine you trust your whole life to someone, yet that someone ends up giving you an incurable disease. I too would feel betrayed.
I will never lie to you again.
Thanks, Brian. That's all I really wanted.
So, do you forgive me?
Yes, I do.
Even though Stewie might have forgiven you, I would never, Brian. I hope you rot in hell for what you did to my poor baby. And there you have it, a canine cocktail of lies, manipulation, and enough crimes to make even Lois wonder why she hasn't called animal control. Brian Griffin isn't a tortured soul. He's a menace in a collar with a thesaurus. If karma were real, this mutt would have been neutered, jailed, and forced to watch Meg's slideshow presentations for eternity. But instead, he gets to sip martinis and pretend he's better than everyone. Justice? Not in Quahog. But hey, at least we got to watch him spiral.